How's everyone doing? Doing great? Well, thank you for Pastor Joe for giving me the opportunity to speak here this morning. I didn't really have anything prepared, so just please bear with me. I'm just going to go over about almost everything I learned from the summer. Everything good? A little higher? Or bring it lower? Okay, all right, good. So, yeah, honestly, before going into counseling this summer, I didn't really know what to expect. As a camper, going there probably like 5 or 6 times, I knew that, you're going to be doing a lot of one-on-ones with your counselor. You're going to be enjoying the time there. But when me and Alan got there, that week of training, the whole perspective of being a counselor is really different. Just because obviously you're being trained on activities, you're getting a bunch of counseling sessions, but just being able, I guess, to see God work through all the campers was something that, it really touched my heart a lot, So going into the first week, when we had our week of training, we obviously learned a lot of the activities that a bunch of the teens are going to be signing up for, the camps, or the churches, they're going to be running throughout the day. I mean, I know some of the campers like Emiliano, Isaac, and Levi, they all know that. But we went through our week of training, and then we also have deeper counseling sessions. Some of them is kind of debates wise, but then we also had some preachings. Something that really fueled my heart was in 2 Corinthians 12. It's a message that Mr. Bodie spoke to a bunch of the summer staff about, and it was specifically in verse 14 and 15. But if you read the whole chapter from the beginning, it talks about, Paul being able, to feel God's power in his weakness, Talks about the chapter when he first starts that, he shouldn't boast in the revelations that he has, but, he also feels like he should be boasting about it. And then you keep going on and talks about the thorn in the flesh that touches heart. And we were taught, that Mr. Bodie said that thorn in the flesh that was in Paul, it was there to humble him, you know what I mean? And to be able to, feel God's power, as it says in verse 9 and 10, where it says, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I glorify in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses for Christ's sake. For when I'm weak, then I am strong. So it talks about, Paul being able to get that feel because when he's in distress, when he's in the weaknesses and times in his life, he feels God's power in him. And then it moves on to, he keeps going on, and he talks about, being able to serve churches. It says in verse 14, behold, the third time I come to you. So I think this is the first time I think he helped plant the church in Corinth. And then the second time he went back there, and then this is the third time. I will not be burdensome to you, for I seek not yours, but you. But the children ought to lay up for the parents, but the parents for the children. So I think when Mr. Bodie was talking about this, we kind of just have to view ourselves as the children, or the parents being able to, sacrifice for their children, like how parents are, they make the living for their family, right? And it says there in verse 15, and I'll very gladly spent and be spent for you. Though the more abundantly I love you, the less I be loved. And it was more of that verse that kind of just fueled us for the whole summer. We kind of had that one, us counselors, we kind of had that one motto, I guess, throughout the whole summer on just being spent for other people. And what we're saying is here for the campers. So when he says, be gladly spent for you, though the more abundantly I love you, the less I be loved. Our job as counselors, even if sometimes the campers don't really turn their eyes to Christ, we should still show them the love of Christ and, put our full energy into these kids. We only have a week of camp. And a week of camp, I feel like, is not enough to impact. Well, you have enough to impact a camper's life, but it's not enough to, change their whole life around, because they still have to go home and live that Christian life, and the decisions that they made, they have to live it out. So there was 3 questions, that Mr. Bodie asked to us when we heard that message. And it really hit my heart. And it was one, what are some reasons why we don't be spent? And I kind of just filled in some answers that I had. Number 2 is, what are some things I can do specifically to be spent? And then the question number 3 is, are you willing to be spent for Christ? And for us counselors, we heard that message, and he just sent us out there, to pray by ourselves. And it just made me think. I was like, we're going to have this whole, for me, it was 6 or 7 weeks I was going to be there, but for the others, probably like 10 weeks. You're going to be poured out with energy. You're going to be tired every single day. Are you willing, to give all that you have, drain that full battery just for these campers? Because they can go back home, turning back to whatever situation they're in, whether it's a rough or good situation in their life. But you as a counselor have the opportunity to become a good testimony to them. And for me, I was thinking about that. I was like, I think I definitely should be spent for Christ. And that was what our thought mindset was when we came to camp. So when we got to our first week of camp, thankfully it was our church. I was really nervous about all the training we had. Like, would I be able to do good? Would I be able, to have an impact on these campers? And that Sunday before, right before camp happened, we had this thing called Worth It meetings for everyone working at the camp. So for resident staff, summer staff, and leadership live, so a bunch of high schoolers that are wanting to help out with the ministry in camp. But we have this thing called Worth It meetings where we talk about why the week that we just had was worth it. And we just have a bunch of testimonies being said about, like, even if we had this week of staff training that just happened, God was still able to work in their hearts through not only the preaching of the word, but, being able to have fellowship with other believers, and we were able to grow it together in Christ. But, at the end of the Worth It meeting, we get a bunch of our campers lists. So I saw that 3 of my campers were from our church. So it was Jamal, I had Daniel Marlowe, and I also had Russell. So being able to have them, I guess, in my cabin, just having someone in my church, was something that, I think was a blessing, because I was definitely really nervous going into the first week of camp, and I wasn't sure how everything was going to be played out. But since I guess that relationship was already established before, it kind of made it easier, But that week of camp, we had Andy Gleiser preach. He talked about, he preached on the whole week on encounters with Jesus, and talking about, him and his wife's condition with cancer. Just, it spoke to a lot of the campers' hearts. And I remember I had this one camper. He's going through a lot of rough situations. It's not that he had a rough upbringing, but his dad was, he's a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. And I guess growing up in a military family, he really loved it. But I guess one problem that he had was, he moved a lot, like growing up. And he talked about his struggles about making relationships, having friends, to not really be able to speak to other people about. And I remember when I asked him on a scale of 1 to 10, like how sure he is of going to heaven when he dies. He knew, but he wasn't confident at all looking back in his life. He said his confidence was like a 2 out of 10. So like working through it, I showed him a couple Bible verses. I tried doing a one-on-one with him like almost every single day, because he always raised his hand at the end of the message. And throughout the week, he would share more stuff about his life. And towards the end of the week, I guess, there was this one message, I forgot what it was, but an Andy Gleiser, like, he came out the door after the sermon, and then he told me, I think it was either a Friday night or Thursday. I think it was a Friday night. So right before the campfire, testimony campfire. He told me at one point of his life, when he was like 13 or 14, he's a senior now, that he wanted to take his own life. And I think that was like probably one of the hardest things for me to counsel, because I never really been through that before. But just showing that, I tried to give him more hope. I showed him on Romans 8 how we aren't separated from the love of Christ. Once we are in Christ, we don't have to be afraid anymore. But that was one of the hardest things that, I guess like for like 5-10 minutes, like I didn't really know what to say. Like I was trying to like flip through passages, and I guess when you have situations like that, you just look at your own life and just see like how blessed you are, to have parents that bring you up in a good family, that you have people in your lives that pour out into you, and it wasn't really the same for him. So he told me that, like at the end of that week, he's like, dude, Mr. Jared, man, like you saved my life. And I was like, no, it wasn't me. It was God who did all that. He worked in your heart, so that you can be more confident that you are going to heaven. And then at the end of the week, I gave all of my campers hugs. We all said our goodbyes. But that 1 week alone, it just showed me that, being a counselor is actually a lot more difficult than you think, because you're going to get kids from different situations in their lives, and you have to point out some part of scripture to them. And that alone, it was like already something difficult for me, because I'm just like, where do I have to go in the Bible? Like, so sometimes I just have to have some go-tos. But it showed me more that like I should definitely dive into my scripture more, know some verses in the Bible that I can go to when it comes to things like lust, my relationship with God, how I can know what God's will is for me, like all those things all together. So that weekend ended. We had our new week. I had a bunch of kids from Bakersfield, some kids from Arizona, and then somewhere else. It was a cabin of 6. And that week I told myself, I'll pour out more, So I spent time with them, but I forgot that week, that my job as a counselor is to, preach Christ to them. So I thought, like, trying to be an impact to them by spending more time with them would be good, which it was, but at the same time, you have to preach Christ to them, which I did. But there was one camper that I had that second week. He was in a relationship, and one thing that he said he struggled with was lust. And I remember hearing the weekend after, one of his friends from my cabin also told me that relationship that he just had, it just ended because he fell into lust again. And looking back into that week, I was just like, I could have poured out into that one camper more if I only knew. Sometimes you just like, at the end of the week, you kind of feel like everything's good, but then later on, you're just like, you have to look back, and there's just a lot of things that I would have, like, I regret, because I should have put more time into, talking with them, which I didn't. But like I said, like, you have a bunch of campers from other perspectives. Like, you don't know where their heart is. You only get to know a certain part of them, like when you first meet them. So that was, I guess, when we had that one, when I had that one relationship with that camper, I was just like, I wish I did more, at least to try getting closer to him. His name was Titus. So the end of that week, we had our Worth It meetings again. By the way, I also was like summer staff for like Leadership Live. One thing you got to do at the end of the week is you can pretty much do anything. Like on Saturdays, you can have time to go back home. So that Saturday of the end of that second week, I was able to go to Las Vegas and check up on that camper I had in my first week, because one other counselor was also from that same church. And it was cool to see that going to his church, he actually like seems a lot more happy. And they had a VBS, and he was really joyous to serve. And I guess it was really cool to see, that his life can just turn around in just 1 week of camp. So it was really a blessing, to go to visit that church and just see some of my campers again. Going into the third week, this is the last week of sponsor camps. So what we do as our church, we go to sponsor camps where Ironwood pretty much runs the whole program. And in the month of July, which they're doing still currently. They have custom camps, and there'd be a leading church that chooses how everything's going to be run. The only thing that Ironwood does is we, as counselors and a bunch of other staff, we lead the activities, the games, and then the final scorings at the end. Some of the campers still know what I'm talking about for that. But the worship, the service, and how schedule is run, the church, whoever hosts it, gets to choose. But we are still in sponsor camp, so this is my last week of sponsor camp. I had 10 kids, so it was the most kids I ever had for in my cabin. And one of my campers, I had the speaker's son. If you guys know Pastor Will Cover, do you know Pastor Will Cover? Yeah. So I had his son. He worked in Leadership Live, and I had a bunch of other campers. Some of them from Pahrump, some of them from Washington, and I had 2 campers. I remember talking to them, or actually, what's it called? At the beginning of the week, what I do is I try getting a note card, and I kind of see where they are at with their relationship with God. And one question I asked to each of them is, what is one sin that you're struggling with and you've been dealing with recently? And it's kind of crazy to see, I guess, from these past weeks of camp, how a lot of teenage boys tend to struggle with lust and pornography. Like, we went through a counseling session on it, and they said that the average teenage boy at least starts dealing with some type of that lust at the age of 12, which is, if you think about that, that's like 6th or 7th grade. It's really young. And 2 of the guys over there in my cabin, or I think 3, they dealt with lust like that. And I guess I was able to counsel them through it, but it's kind of interesting to see how, some of their background reasons why I guess they do something like that is because I guess they have loneliness in their life. Like 2 of my campers there, they only grew up with a single mom in their home. And I guess just showing them scriptures and verses is an encouragement, but I mean, we can't really, we can't do anything about it when they go back home. So what I tell a lot of my campers is that, have someone accountable who can share, you can share things with and can keep you in check from time to time. And I'm not sure how they're doing now, but they're from Utah. But I'm hoping that I'm still praying that, now that they're doing good. So that was pretty much all of Sponsor Week. After all the Sponsor Week happened, we move on to another training week, which now we're being taught how custom camps are run, which is a lot more different because the cabin that you get, sometimes you're not going to be assigned to a cabin. You're going to be put more on program assisting because on custom camps, the churches bring their own counselors, and I guess that's good because they already know their campers. And in custom camps, they also put their whole cabin, like all the campers in their cabin are from the same church. So whether their church is big or not, they have like 40 kids that they brought to camp. 10 of them that are boys can be in one cabin, or they can be split into 2, but they're all going to be in one church. It all depends on how they want everything to be run. But I mean, we had that training week, and I remember we went to the beach one weekend with some counselors, and we were able to reflect on, the past weeks that we had in sponsor camp. And one counselor, his name is Mr. Tim. We were driving back home from the beach, and he was just talking to me, he wants to go into camp ministry. And he was talking to me about, why he wants to go to camp ministry. Like, he always loved going to camp. He's from Wisconsin. He goes to Maranatha. But he was telling me, he went to Bob Jones, and one reason why a camp ministry always was something that, he wanted to do was because, like, there was one summer, because he went to Bob Jones before, and he had a tuition problem, and he was working like 30, 40 hours a week trying to pay it off, and nothing was able to help that because he has school, he has 2 lives that he has to sort out through. And going into camp, his dad is a pastor and he has good relationships with the camp he was going to be working at that summer. And one guy, or I guess for the past weeks, he was also praying, asking God, like, how am I able to pay this tuition off? And that one camp that he's going to work at, a guy that he was emailing, he was telling him about the problems that he had with tuition. And he talked about, or the program director said, he's just like, if you work here for this whole summer, I'll do my job and pay for your tuition for the whole semester. And that was a good blessing for him. And he now is, surrendered to try going to camp ministry. He's a counselor this summer, but he doesn't know where God is leading, which camp God is leading him to. But we were driving back to Ironwood. We went to Newport Beach for that Saturday, and he was talking to me, about some of the struggles he has as a counselor. So last year he worked at Camp Chautauqua. If you guys know that, it's a camp up in northwest Wisconsin. And he had a camper who, if you know, I guess they had Leadership Live in Ironwood, but it's their version of Leadership Live. And he had this one camper who was dealing with really heavy bitterness. He was saying that his dad pretty much murdered his younger sister when he was really young. And he ended up going to prison, but he's had, ever since his whole life, he's had a very hard time forgiving his dad because of it. And we were talking about, when you go through those situations during counseling, we don't know what to say. When I had that first week where one of my campers had thoughts of suicide, for 5-10 minutes, he was just straight up quiet. So for Mr. Tim, he, when he was going through that, he's just he didn't know what to say as well. But, and the kid was also he was a Christian, he knew what he had to do, but that bitterness was still in him. And he was just telling me, sometimes all you got to do is just pour out to the camper as much as possible, because yeah, you can try counseling him through it, but if you just pour your whole life or that whole time that you have there at camp, if you can pour into that one camper, that could probably change something. And we didn't really get to finish that whole talk because we already arrived at Ironwood that week, but those things just keep reminding me throughout camp, how blessed I am, to grow up in a good home, but a bunch of other things as well. So at the end of that week, we had another Worth It meeting, like they said, and they also revealed to us, how Ironwood, they wanted to buy out another camp in Sequoia. I don't know if Alan told you about it, but yeah, they bought out. They're planning on trying to buy an area. They're probably later this evening they might talk about if they actually bought it or not, or if the whole board was able to agree if they can actually own the camp. But they're pretty much planning on trying to get a camp up there in Sequoia, so that's an hour and a half from us, which is closer. So it'll be still part of Ironwood, but they have their own separate ministry. And during that Worth It meeting, we just all prayed, and it was really cool to see everyone just praying for for what God can do for the future. And I also remembered that week of training, we also were able to go through the history of Ironwood. There was a video that was 17 minutes long, and pretty much it just showed how Ironwood started. It started 50 or 60 years ago, I think back in the 60s. Pastor Mr. Walt Brock, he was the guy one of the founders of the camp, and his youth pastor was also Hal Hamilton back in Canoga Park when he still served there. And just being able to see how they started a camp from literally nothing, and the only thing that they had was just faith to build on from that camp, it made me cry because when you go down that dirt road of Ironwood, that's 3 miles, you literally see like straight up nothing. It's just straight up dirt. And then once you hit Ironwood, you just see a little small town. And this, like, throughout the past 50 years, you just see like how God worked into making that camp, right? Their first week of camp, they had, I think, about 15 teenagers. I think it was back in the 70s, and it was the church in Santa Maria that came. But you see how through the years, they keep building things, and God just works in the ministry that they had there in camp. Because, I mean, who can know you just build a straight up camp like in the middle of the desert, right? Like, who can ever think about something like that? But just being able to see, like, I think talking about like having a camp out in the middle of the desert where there's no distractions, where the campers don't need to use their phones and just focus on what Christ has for them. It was a really huge blessing, just because their whole thing about, you know, why they don't have distractions is also, you know, trying to have the people who work there pour out into the campers. You know, you only have a week, as I said, to try giving as much time to the campers as possible. And in 1 week, you can do something like that, but that's the whole point of like the camp ministry, right? Like you won't have as much time to do it, but you'll be able, you can make a little impact just off the small time that you have. And it made me cry though, just of like seeing how much people got saved through all those weeks of camp. I think as of now, after this past 7 weeks of camp, there's about 40 salvations ever since the start of camp, but there was about 130 to 150 decisions that were made, whether that is research to salvation, deciding to read their Bible more, growing in their walk with Christ. But even if it's just one decision made, that alone makes 1 week of camp worth it. That's why we have that worth it meeting, because you can see that campers' lives want to change. And sometimes we don't even write out cards. Like, I missed out on a lot of counseling cards that I could have written out. So it can probably even be double of that. So we had our first week of custom camp week. This week, it was a bunch of juniors. I was selected to be a counselor that week. And kids are so much more different. That first week, I mean, like I said, of custom camp weeks, they all come from the same church. So as soon as I seen these bunch of like kids that are like from like 7 to like probably 10 years old, they already know each other. As soon as I brought them to the cabin, it was craziness. They started running around. They started throwing a bunch of things. It was super hard to like clean the cabin in the morning. And I was glad that camp that week finished on Friday instead of Saturday, because it felt like 2 weeks. But no, what I liked about actually having kids that week of camp is that how clingy kids can be instead of teens. Like, teens will obviously love you. They're a lot more laid back. They know how to take care of themselves, but kids don't really do that. So they rely on you on a lot of things. They want you to be there for almost every single activity that you have. I can't remember how much times like my kids ask me like, "Oh, Mr. Jared, can we do this?" Because, you know, they're kids. They want someone to do something with. Even just you being there makes an impact on them. And during custom weeks, camp weeks, there's a bunch of other speakers. So a bunch of, depending on how the church wants it to be run, the main church can ask other pastors from other churches if they want to speak as well. And we had this one, I mean, most of the messages are a lot more kiddish, but we had this one message on Daniel, in the book of Daniel. I forgot exactly where it was. It was a really short message. And I think it was when the Persians, I guess, were taking over. I forgot who it was, but there was this party, and then the king, and then I think it was the Persians. If I'm saying this correctly, I don't remember if you remember. And then the question at the end was, it pretty much was a salvation message. And the question was at the end for a bunch of campers is, do you know if God or Christ has forgiven you? It was, do you know if you're saved? Do you know because a lot of kids can just say, oh, my parents helped me, right? But the question was, do you yourself know if you're forgiven? And it was cool to see like 20 kids just walk out that door. And I had like 2 of my campers raise their hands, and they were crying because they're like, I know I'm saved. I know my parents, like, I'm baptized and all that. And I was just like, it's not what you do yourself. It's what Christ did in you. And that kid at the end of the day was able to have reassurance of that salvation. But it's also funny to see how like kids also think as well, because if Levi and Isaac know Mr. Doug, he had a kid go up to him right after that service, and when he was asking him about like sin and stuff, that one kid talked about he was playing football with his sister, and he ended up hurting her, and he was saying he thought that when he hurt his sister, that alone was a sin, and he said that I just have to ask to say sorry to her, and it was really funny, just like how kids think really differently, with even if it's like not really a sin, I guess in a sense, they just want to talk to you about it, and it was really funny. But at the end of the week, I think I got 3 of my campers, 3 of the kids there ended up being getting saved, and they were able to understand that Jesus died for them. That's one of the biggest things I harped on with kids, because I don't know if they really understand it fully, but I tried my best also, and rely on God to explain to them that it's something that you can do. It's what God did in you, and I explained to them, showed them like Soldier Mountain and Bunch of Creation, and just told them like how big God is, and that alone just encouraged them. But I had to keep the devotion short because like kids' mindsets, they don't focus. Their attention span lasts like every 30 seconds to like a minute, because they would be looking around, they want to stand up and then do something. So I had to keep the devotions pretty short. So then again, we had another weekend, and then it was this last week of camp. 6 of my campers they grew up in a Filipino home like me, and then one of my campers, he was African American, and it was, I guess, this past week of camp, since I've been more in reflection mode because it was my last week, it was just really cool to see how good God was this whole summer. And not only was it encouraging to see campers come to Christ and make a decision, but it was also encouragement to me, because I get to hear preaching almost every single day, and it really changed my walk and my mindset of Christ. And I would definitely, if I had the chance and time next summer, I would definitely try to work at Ironwood or whatever camp again. I would definitely try doing it. And I guess for the teens over here, I would really encourage, try to, giving at least one summer, even if it's like a couple weeks, to work at a camp, because you really can see God work in just 1 week for campers, but then you get to see a bunch of other things that God is working in the ministry. So looking back on everything, I'm really thankful for what God's been doing in my life, but also at camp, and I'm really thankful that God, was able to put a camping ministry for Ironwood there. So thank you very much.